A couple of weeks ago, I had a question. See, one of our computers here at the church was very slow, like sloth speed. And I knew there had to be a way to speed it up. So instead of calling someone, I bet you can guess what I did. I Googled it. I Googled the question I had, how to make my particular model of a computer faster. Because, as you know, since the late 90s, early 2000s, Googling it has been the way we get answers to our questions. I can bet that you pull out your phone more often than you know to Google a question that you have. I mean, I can remember when back in the day, we actually had only one option, to use printed materials. Or maybe we had to ask someone when we had big questions. But even back then, before the age of Google, when it was a tough question that maybe you found yourself asking, maybe someone you trusted that you wanted to ask, you might even say it like this: hey, I have a friend who has this question. Does God really care about people? And how do I know? But in reality, that friend was you, right? It's hard to be vulnerable. Maybe we're afraid of asking because we're worried about the answer that we'll get. We're worried that we'll be found out for not knowing what we think we should know. So we say we're asking for a friend when it's really one of us who has those questions. Well, this week on the Daily Dose, we're taking away the worry and the shame from those questions that we have, those questions about faith, about the church, about God. You don't have to ask for a friend. Let's ask it together. And let's look back at that question I mentioned. How do I know God really cares about me? I think sometimes when we think about who God is, what God is, we have this really beautiful way to describe God. We might say, God is love. God is grace. God is peace. And if we pick up our Bibles, we would find those things in the pages of the Bible. All those references we could find to describe God, and they're wonderful. God is God and I am not, so sometimes my human ways of describing God are just not adequate. But if I find myself asking that question that I mentioned, does God really care about me? And someone says, yes, God cares about you. God is love. God is grace. God is peace. That doesn't really leave me a lot to hold on to. Those concepts of God are pretty abstract. And I think sometimes in our lives, maybe especially when we're wondering some of those really harder things like, does God even care? We need a description of God that allows us to hold on to something a little tighter, something we can wrap our heads around a little bit more. So today, let's wonder about this description: God as a shepherd. Now, I know we don't have a lot of shepherds in Alexandria, Minnesota, in really many parts of the United States. We don't really think about raising sheep very often unless you're in that business, but it's different than if you were a shepherd in ancient times, different than it was in Jesus's day and even today in some Eastern cultures. So let's look at the Bible and see as a starting place where we hear God referred to as shepherd. So first, if we read Psalm 23, we hear, "The Lord is my shepherd. I do not want, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil. For you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long." A pretty famous description of God as a shepherd. And sometimes we hear these words, these really famous words, read in hard times at funerals. We might hear these words spoken to us as comfort, even though you're walking through a very dark valley right now. The shepherd is with you. And then we hear Jesus talking about shepherds, about the voice of the shepherd. In John chapter 10, we hear, "I am the good shepherd," Jesus says, "and the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." We hear Jesus go on later in that chapter to say, "My sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me." And then we also hear Jesus talk at a different time about the persistence of a shepherd. We hear in Matthew chapter 18, "If a shepherd has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go in search of that one that went astray? And if he finds it, truly I tell you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 that never went astray. So it is the will of your Father in heaven that one of these little ones should not be lost." The shepherd who's there walking through the valley, the shepherd whose voice is clear and speaking to you, the shepherd who is persistent and searching for you. Next time you're asking, does God really care about me? Picture a shepherd as you hear it described in the Bible. Picture someone leading you, someone speaking to you, someone persisting to find you, even when you wander. I'll link in the comments to this Daily Dose to some videos that talk a little bit more about this idea of God as shepherd that inspired tonight's Daily Dose. And the great thing about these short videos, they're little devotions, and they also have images of sheep and shepherds in the Middle East. Some really great images for you to look at. Some times that you can reflect back on, you can think forward about God as a shepherd. And be sure to tune into the Daily Dose all week as we're asking for a friend some other important questions relating to our faith. Hit subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, share it if you're watching on Facebook, and be sure to tell a friend if you're watching on Cable 181. Thanks so much.
Blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, calls for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mount I'm fixed upon it, mount of thy redeeming love. Oh, to grace, how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy goodness like a fetter bind my wandering heart to thee. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it for thy courts above.
Faultless, I adore your name. Above all else, tune my heart to sing your praise. Above all else, I adore your name. Above all else, tune my heart to sing your praise. Above all else, I adore your name. Above all else, tune my heart to sing your praise. Above all else, I adore your name.
Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it for